Atlantis is often dismissed as this woo-woo thing by many people, it still deeply resonates with us today. And it's still very relevant, in pop culture, in movies and references on YouTube. If you go on YouTube and you look up Atlantis, all these videos have tons of views.
Yeah, and most of them, there's a few I think that we are very much aligned in where we're going with our thinking about Atlantis, but there's a lot of them, my personal opinion is that they're wrong, or that they're just, they've gotten to, the book I'm writing about Atlantis and my public presentation I do is it's called Plato's Atlantis, with the idea of, okay, let's just forget everything else that's accrued to it or accreted to it, like barnacles on the hull of a ship, and just get back to the purity of Plato's account, because that's where 98% of our information about Atlantis has come from Plato. And so there's two ways of thinking. There's an academic way and a more a literal way. And the academic is that Plato only meant it as a socio-political allegory. He didn't actually intend for it to be taken literally, right? And then the other school of thought is that, well, there is a literal reality behind it, but Plato had this or that or this other detail wrong. And by changing the date here or changing its location, it might deviate from this very precise and specific details that Plato gives. But nonetheless, this is where Atlantis was, and the places that it's been suggested Atlantis exists have been all over the place. And probably the most talked about one recently is that Richat structure.
If you want, I have a picture of it. I can share my screen right here.
Yeah.
Can you see the map?
I sure can.
Okay. Here's Mauritania, and you can start to see how big this is. Here's the eye of the Sahara.
Yep, there it is.
So there it is. And this has gotten a lot of attention because it kind of fits the dimensions of Atlantis a little bit. Is this possibly Atlantis here?
No, I'm sorry to disappoint, but no, I don't think that is Atlantis.
Why not?
And I'll tell you, there's the first reason for that is that this is something like 1,200 feet above sea level, maybe more than that. Okay, now good. This is a beautiful graphic of the ringed city of Atlantis. And I tell you what here we can do. I could pull up some slides as well. I have some slides of that. And Plato, he gives a very precise description of the ringed city of Atlantis. And he gives it in terms of stades. And the stade depends, there were variations on the stade, but essentially it was about, in ancient Greece, it was about 608 feet. And that was the length of a stadium. That's where we get the word stadium from. The place we still use stades today, actually, there's the English, the imperial counterpart to the Greek system stade was furlong. And where we use furlongs today is in horse racing. It's a remnant of ancient Britain. And most like the feet, the yard, the inches, the furlongs, that's all part of the so-called imperial system that we've inherited from ancient Britain. In the Greek measurement system, a stade was where we, like I said, from the word stade, we get the word stadium. And it's based upon a geodetic number. It's 608 feet. Okay, so I could actually, let's see here.
I'll stop sharing.
Okay, so I want to read to you here what Plato has to say. Let me see if I can. Okay, so this is directly from Plato. Let's see. First of all, they bridged over the zones of sea which surrounded the ancient metropolis, making a road to and from the royal palace. And at the very beginning, they built the palace in the habitation of the god and of their ancestors, which they continued to ornament in successive generations, every king surpassing the one who went before him to the utmost of his power. until they made the building a marvel to behold for size and for beauty. And beginning from the sea, they bored a canal of 300 feet in width and 100 feet in depth and 50 stadia in length. So I'm going to share a screen. Okay, so now as we're looking at this, here's the ringed structure. Okay, so beginning from the sea, they bored a canal of 300 feet in width and 100 feet in depth. That's this right here. This is your 300-foot wide. Now, all this is to scale, right? So after they dug this canal that was 100 feet in depth, 50 stadia in length. Remember I said a stade was about 608 feet. So if you go 608 times 50, it's going to give you 30,400 feet. So that would be right at 5.75 miles in length. So that's the canal that's coming in from the sea. So it's, like I said, you've got about so a little less than 6 miles, about 5 3/4 miles that this canal is long right here. And it connected the ringed city to the sea. So they brought the seawater in. Now it's showing brown instead of blue because after the canal was dug, they built a bridge over the canal that was almost like a roof on the canal. And so you could traverse on foot or horseback or whatever on top, but it was high enough that you could still sail ships beneath the roof to each of the rings of water. Is that making sense?
Yes. Wow, that's a big canal.
It's a very big canal, yeah. So, and beginning from the sea, so I should actually do an updated version where I'm showing the sea down here, the ocean, so you can see that it's linked to the ocean. So that right there is the first major discrepancy between what Plato's describing and the Richat structure. You can, for example, look and see how far the Richat structure is from the ocean. And then you realize that during the days of Atlantis, the ocean was actually several hundred feet lower. So that would put the coastline even further away from the Richat structure. So you have to assume that the Richat structure was lifted up rather than subsided down. Plato says absolutely nothing about Atlantis rising 12 or 1,400 feet above sea level, right? He talks about it subsiding. He's very clear on that. I can read the account in a second here. Anyways, okay, so beginning from the sea, they bored a canal of 300 feet in width and 100 feet in depth and 50 stadia in length, which they carried through to the outermost zone, which is this, making a passage from the sea up to this, which became a harbor, and leaving an opening sufficient to enable the largest vessels to find ingress. Moreover, they divided at the bridges the zones of land which parted the zones of the sea. So see the blue part, that's a zone of the sea, and then the brown part is a zone of land. Okay, leaving room for a single trireme to pass out of one zone into another, and they covered over the channels so as to leave a way underneath for the ships, for the banks were raised considerably above the water. Okay, so I'm gonna jump down here to the next one. I've done a little 3D graphic to help show the situation. So here you see the sea. The canal connects to the sea. It's 50 stadia in length, which is 5.75 miles about. And then you've got the outer zone of water, the outer water ring. Then you have a zone of land. You've got another zone of water, another of land, another zone of water, and finally you've got the central island that has the Temple of Poseidon on it. Now, this is showing the bridge here over it, right? So, but if I remove the bridge, you would see that under the bridge, the canals connect all three zones of water. Does that, are you able to picture that?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, here's kind of another idea of it. You can, if you actually look, you can see I've left an opening here to show that the canal, So in other words, you could sail a ship through that canal from the ocean up here to the rings of water. You'd be under this bridge, which was a roof, and you could sail right up, and the canals would extend through the zones of land. It's kind of an interesting concept. So then Plato goes on, and he says, now the largest of the zones in which a passage was cut from the sea was 3 stadia in breadth. So I'm showing that right here. You see that 3? Yep, 3 stadia in breadth. And the zone of land, which came next, of equal breadth. So it also was 3. But the next 2 zones, the one with water and the other of land, were 2 stadia. Okay. And the one which surrounded the central island was 1 stadium only in width. So that's this one. All this, including the zones and the bridge, which was the 6th part of a stadium in width, they surrounded by a stone wall on every side, placing towers and gates on the bridges where the sea passed in. Okay, and then the middle island was 5 stadia in breadth. Okay, so now you can go. Like you can see down here, numbers represent distance in stades. 1 Greek stade, 608 feet. You can add these up. And how many, what's the total width of the plane here? Well, 3 plus 3 is 6, plus 4 is 10, plus 1 is 11. You've got 11 over here, that's 22. Add the 5, that's 27 stades. Now take your calculator, Mark, and put in 27 stades times 608. You're going to get 16,416 feet. And then you're going to divide that by 5,280 to convert it to miles. And you'll see that the entire width of this complex here is just a little over 3 miles. Do you confirm what
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now with that in mind, I'm going to jump down here to, let's see, to the Richat structure. Okay, so now you're seeing the Richat structure?
Yes.
Okay, so we've done the dimensional analysis of this. I've used all the scientific studies and surveys of the structure. And now what I'm going to do, look carefully now at the image there of the Richat structure. And now I'm going to superimpose the ringed city that we just developed based on Plato's accounts. I'm going to superimpose at the same scale. So watch here.
Oh, wow. Quite a difference.
I would say you cannot compare the two terms of size.
Wow. I guess the next question is, what is this Richat structure? It just seems so unnatural.
It is, here it is right here. The Eye of Africa, it is an isolated Cretaceous alkaline hydrothermal complex. Of course, I mean, you knew that, right?
Oh, duh. Yeah, that was going to be my first guess.
Yeah, duh. Hydrothermalism, hot water, played an important role in the evolution of the Richat complex. It is responsible notably for the karst collapse, central megabreccia formation, the alteration sequence of the rhyolites, the potassic alteration of the gabbros, and the stable isotope enrichment of the carbonatites. Which again, I'm sure you knew that, but I'm just reiterating it here. For the
yeah, was that English?
Coexistence of intrusive alkaline and tholeiitic rocks within the same igneous complex shows the importance of the regional structural system on the caldera history. Okay, so all the jargon aside, it's basically a volcanic structure, an ancient volcanic structure that was a domed uplift. So when you have a dome, if you can picture that you've got, can you see my hands on the
yes.
thumb? Okay, so picture you've got layers of rock, and then you've got pressure from underneath causing an updoming like this. But now you've got multiple layers arched over that dome, and then you truncate the dome. You slice off the top part of the curve, and what you've got visible now is a series of concentric rings.
It's like an onion that,
like an onion,
got cut off.
Yes,
Yeah.
You got it exactly. As long as you cut that onion along the proper plane, you would get the same exact effect. And that's what it is. It's a natural formation, like the key right down here. Pre-existing deep structural weaknesses responsible for the elliptical shape of the Richat caldera acted as a pathway for the ascent of magmas and allowed the rise of carbonatitic and kimberlitic melts from the asthenosphere and basaltic magma from the subcontinental lithospheric mantle.
So what could have cut it off?
Erosion, water erosion.
Was this something that happened over a long period of time, or was this an instant type of thing?
I think it was probably, when we say a long period of time, I say a long period of time, but not at modern erosional rates, because we can look, and I can pull up Google Earth here, and I'll show you in a second. You can see the evidence of huge water flows over Mauritania that probably the last time it occurred would have been right there at that window, give or take a millennia around the Younger Dryas. Here you can see the magma reservoir that's rising to the surface and forcing the up dome of the, you can see the layered rock here, right? And so it's because it's this up dome, and then at the top of it is sheared off. So in cross section, what you're then seeing is the rings. And I mean, the basalts are there. You know, you can see the different rock types. It's now, is it possible that ancient peoples saw this? From the ground, it's very difficult to tell this multi-ring structure. But is it possible that there, I mean, I'm almost certainly there were humans here. Probably nomadic. There haven't seen any evidence that there was settled communities around here. But again, there could have been enough erosion, you know, during the climatic transitions and stuff, that if there were settlements, it would have been erased. Also, probably during the latter part of the Ice Age, there may have been a very different environment here. I mean, we know that, you know, in the early Holocene, there was pretty much grasslands and trees and all kinds of stuff up there in the Saharan and sub-Saharan regions. But yeah, I think that if we go through, take Plato's details at face value, there's no way we can consider this to be Atlantis.
So in this instance, the myths and the geology are just not lining up.
No, they're not. However, there are myths and geology that do line up. Like here, you can, here's an interesting cross section of in the early stages of formation. You've got this doming uplift. You've got these fault lines with the magma coming up. And those are the basaltic magmas. And then the rhyolitic magmas. So there are different types of magmas. Hydrothermal breccia, that's formed in basically hot water. Limestone, you can see there was a limestone layer here, overlaying quartzitic sandstone, and then more sandstone on top of it. This is what is called the basement down here. It's not really known what the basement consists of. Anyways, you go through, and here shows you the sequence of formation. Then you had this central structure collapse down, because as the magma flows out, it creates a void, and then you'll have this structural collapse, and then it ends up like this. Then the erosion happens, and this is what you're left with. And this stuff in the middle here, this is the breccia, which means broken rock. Okay, so then I, just for the fun of it, I enlarged the ringed city of Atlantis to the same size as the Richat structure, just to see how it meshed up. And it doesn't mesh up that well, actually, when you look at it. You can see me scrolling back and forth here.
But if that was a city, wouldn't there be, and there's remnants of a city, if that was a city, wouldn't there be things like pottery and sculptures and just a little bit of evidence that there was
Yeah,
humans?
I mean, there is a little bit of evidence that people have been there, which shouldn't be surprising. Okay, so yeah, here we go. Here's the outcropping megabreccia at the center of the Richat structure. So this you can see part of one of the rings here, and then there's your your basin area between, and then probably part of another ring right here. And there's
seems like not a lot of work has been done out there. You know, it's so desolate.
Right. So it's a very interesting structure, no doubt. I just don't think it was why the Richat structure is not Atlantis. 1,400 feet above sea level. No evidence of isostatic movement. Was never an island. Limestones are 90 million years old. So that means it was at sea level 90, shallow marine. Limestones that I just showed you on there would have been in a shallow marine environment, but those fossils are 90 million years old. It's not west of the Pillars of Hercules. It's not in the Atlantic Ocean. The rings are a natural formation. There's a huge disparity in size between the circular city described by Plato and the Richat structure. Plato repeatedly uses the Greek term nason, which means island, or nasos. But I do say this, Richat structure may have been part of a far-flung Atlantean empire. I'm willing to concede that much.
Anything's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I find it interesting. I just did a video on Plato's allegory of the cave.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very clear in that account that it's an allegory. It's pretty obvious. And in this account, it's not obvious at all. It seems like he's very meticulous about measurements. And if it's an allegory, it's like, why is all this other detail in here that's way too specific,
Yeah. Well, he makes it very clear himself that it's not an allegory. Right there in the text of Timaeus and Critias. The first thing he says at the very beginning of Critias is this, or at the beginning of Timaeus. Now this is Critias speaking. And Critias says to Socrates, "Then listen, Socrates, to a strange tale, which is, however, certainly true, as Solon, who was the wisest of the 7 sages, declared." So right from the very beginning, he's saying this is, it's certainly true. He's not
certainly
saying
true.
This is an allegory. It's true.
Right. One thing that you told me that blew my mind was that the Atlantic Ocean may have been called the Atlantis Ocean at one point because the sea is flexible.
Yes.
That stuck in my mind when you told me that.
Well, think about the letter C. Take the word circus, for example. There you've got, both pronunciations of the sea, the hard C and the soft C. So if you look at Atlantic, we generally pronounce it as a hard C. But in ancient Greek, it was a soft C. So it was the Atlantis Ocean.
There you go.
So yeah, right. There you go.
I mean, the clue is right there in front of your face.
The clue is right there in front of your effing face, okay?
Well, I think a lot of people, so we just desperately want to know where Atlantis is. So when we are presented with some story that shows something that looks like Atlantis, we eat it all up. And it's very fun to just entertain those ideas.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And to me, it's even more interesting when you actually look at the details of Plato's story, and then you see, well, is there geology that aligns with that? And I showed you a very prominent example of that in terms of the timing. I mean, how curious is it that precisely at the point when Atlantis supposedly subsides is exactly associated with a catastrophic sea level rise?